Good morning. My name is Maruchi Guzman. I'm the Executive Director of Latina Leadership, a nonprofit organization serving Central Florida. Thank you for joining our panel discussion today on but please help me welcome our three panelists. We have Senator Victor Torres, who proudly served in the United States Marine Corps. He currently serves as State Senate District Senator in District 15. And we have Maria Reyes, born in Puerto Rico and raised in Madrid. She's currently the Florida State Director for CHISPA. She has a background in global, national, state, and local organizing, and is a strong believer in the empowerment of communities of color and equality for Puerto Ricans on the island and in Florida. We also have Cody Glacier, the legal director of the Florida Housing Coalition. Cody is an expert on inclusionary housing policy, community land trust, fair housing, land use, environment law, and laws it relates to housing. As legal director, he has a lead role in the coalition's advocacy efforts at all levels of government and has expertise in drafting state legislation and local housing ordinances and policy. We are grateful to our panelists for taking time to lend their expertise and to discuss this important priority for the Puerto Rican community. So we'll start talking about affordable housing. So we know when we talk about affordable housing, sometimes there's a not in my backyard sentiment. As advocates and policymakers, how can we help change this perception and narrative around affordable housing? Cody, if you want to start, and we'll go from there. Cody, I don't know if it's just me, but I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Maria, do you want to start and see if it's his mic?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Good morning, everyone. Cody, I'll take it from here, and when you solve your sound issues, you're welcome to move forward. So good morning, Maruchi. Good morning, everyone in the room. So many beautiful people. Absolutely. I think the not in my backyard sentiment, it comes from a long story of, racism, segregation, discrimination. And I think that's also a lack of understanding what does affordable housing mean, right? I think that a lot of people have a wrong idea. Affordable housing also means not only free housing or housing projects, which are definitely dignified needs that our communities have. But it also means build more for a working class, a middle class, communities that make minimum wage. And I think that we need to start engaging those conversations. I also need to start pushing the barriers of what does it mean being truly diverse, truly inclusive neighborhoods and communities, and what are the advantages of them. I think that we are not saying enough, and we allow that, discrimination and prejudices really kind of taint the notion of what affordable housing is. And I think we need to be brave and sometimes, have those difficult conversations with our neighbors, with our elected officials, especially for us, Hispanics, Latinx, immigrant communities, Black and brown communities. We need to keep push forward and demand and that housing, as well as any other services that dignify our communities, will be truly democracy, will be truly inclusive, and also think about when are the opportunities that we have said we have used the not in my backyard position when it's comfortable for us. So I think that those are some of the things that I think that need to be happen from a community organizing background. Also, we need to remember that a lot of the funding comes directly to benefit certain groups, certain sectors of the communities, and that it's up to us to advocate that funding, services, and products and needs, just as housing, come across the board in a truly equal and fair system.
Thank you. Cody, you want to try again?
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Oh, wonderful. All right, we did it. All right, end of the panel. Okay, so yeah, thank you for having me this morning. Good morning. And the only thing I'll really add to that great answer is I think it also takes really strong political will from local elected officials who really do have the end decision-making authority for a lot of these affordable housing projects. And so I think there needs to be, zoning reforms, whether it's by allowing more housing as of right, reducing the number of public hearings for certain projects, anything you can do so that elected officials can't use NIMBYism mentality as their basis for decisions, I think is just very fundamental, because as was mentioned, so much of NIMBYism unfortunately stems from prejudice, stems from racism, stems from this fear of the other. And, until you root out all of that from the individual person, I think the first thing to do is make sure that elected officials just can't use that sentiment to make their decisions. And so I'll just say that, local political will is just so fundamental with the NIMBYism conversation. And that's really where it starts and ends in a lot of these decisions.
So I guess the follow-up one to that would be, so we have a lot of advocates on today's panel watching and listening. So what questions, what conversations can they be having with these elected officials to address something like not in my backyard?
I think that we need to start by being honest and put in front and center what not in my backyard said, what not in my backyard means, right? A lot of this, sentiment comes from, Jim Crow and has the tools, right, of the legacy of Jim Crow's laws, of segregation, of racism, of ignorance that is hurting us as a society. But I think that also a lot of the conversations that we should be having with those elected officials are for laws, legislation that enable our communities, to move into those housing units when they are ready. And again, make sure that housing is seen as a need and not a luxury, and that our Black and brown communities are seen as important, as vital, as front and center, and not seen as disposable. We could live without. We want. I always. I'm careful when we talk about beautification projects and things like that. That a lot of that, is, code language for whiteness, gentrification, all those things that are barriers to access to our communities to have the housing that they deserve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll follow up with that by, if you're advocating to a local government and you're asking, what questions should advocates be addressing, I think it always starts with just having those numbers of your housing needs, right? Being able to make the argument of showing, how many people in your community are paying more than 30% of their income on housing, how many housing units are available. I think something that's very important to look at is, how your local government or state government is using its resources, right? As was mentioned earlier, you're really looking at their budget and seeing, how are they spending their state, their federal, their local funds on housing? Is it really meeting the needs in your community that need to be addressed? And also looking at land. I mean, local government has an immense amount of land resources that can be used not only to build affordable housing, but to sell the land and then use those proceeds for an affordable housing trust fund. And so I think just really doing your homework and understanding, what power your local government has and what resources it has, and understanding all of that and really finding gaps of how they can be improved. I think unless you go with a very specific ask of, this is a policy, this is a zoning change you need to make, this is how you should be targeting your funding, that I think that having that specific ask is very important when you're talking to a local government specifically.
So I know
I would like to add something else, Marushi.
Yeah.
I think also something that we should be saying when we're having this conversation specifically about housing is, what are going to be the long-term, goals for the county or the region or the city that we're talking in terms of sustainability, green housing units and affordability and all those things, because that really will tell us about the long life and long impact of those, affordable housing units in our communities. At the end of the day, that's what we don't want to solve a problem right now that is going to turn into something bigger. We really want to transform, the way that housing is perceived in our communities.
So I know as a nonprofit, we do housing, we do development. And one of the conversations we often hear when we talk to a legislator is related to the Sadowski Trust Fund is, well, it's really not that much money, so it's really not going to make a dent in affordable housing. We know that outside of 2020, the fund is constantly swept. So, Cody, what immediate impact do you think not rating the Sadowski Fund could have on affordable housing? We know it's not going to fix everything overnight, but what are we missing by it being rated every year?
Yeah, so if Sadowski was fully funded this year, basically what was collected this past year, not including the money that was vetoed last year, there'd be $423 million for our state's affordable housing programs, which includes $296 million for the SHIP program, which goes to 119 local governments throughout the state. And you're right, it's not going to solve the affordable housing crisis, but it can go a long way. So I just pulled some numbers from Senator Torres' district in Osceola County. So a place like Osceola County would receive like $5.5 million, right? Which doesn't sound like a lot, but that could help build, it could help buy and renovate some upwards of 270 homes, serving 680 people. That's the numbers that I pulled out. That's not insignificant. That's really helping out a lot of folks, moving to first-time home ownership. One of the things that SHIP and these Sadowski Trust Funds are really great at is home ownership and helping lower-income households move into first-time home ownership, especially now when you're seeing home prices drastically increase over the past year. The Sadowski Trust Funds can be used for down payment assistance to help those folks move into home ownership for the first time. It can help with new construction, home repair. So I think to your point, it's not going to solve the crisis, but even for a place like Orange County that I pulled out, also Senator Torres' district, it could help 2,500 people if Sadowski was fully funded. Again, it's not everybody that needs to be helped, but that puts a good dent in the need. And as we chip away each and every year, you can start to help a lot of folks over time.
Absolutely. And from your perspective, for you or Maria, what bills currently filed in this legislative session would help impact affordable housing?
Sadly, there are not enough direct bills that will give us better, housing. There is not the spirit. There's some things. I think that important bills right now that are in. There is a bill from Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith and Chevron Jones that talks about paying off the electric bills that people has right now. And I think those are needs that are directly from COVID. People is right now having like bills disconnected, water, electricity disconnected. I think that is not going to be directly into buy housing, but it's going to help them stay in their homes that they are right now. I don't know if Cody knows of specific bills that are made for housing, but I don't think that there's nothing that is going to make day and night differences. A lot of the bills that we see, sadly, are directed to code and permission and things like that. There's not too much will in Tallahassee for Florida to really make the housing changes that we need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the one bill that we've been following, there's several kind of indirectly that affect affordable housing, but the one is the Stop the Sweeps bill that would really elevate the Sadowski Trust Funds to a place in Florida statutes that basically tells the legislature that they can't sweep it. And it has some challenges because since it's a law that regulates the legislator's own behavior, they can just choose to ignore it at a later date. But it is very helpful for our debate. It's helpful for the legislature to indicate that they're not going to sweep the trust funds. So that's Senate Bill 510, House Bill 13. There's also some other great bills around COVID and evictions. House Bill 499, Senate Bill 576 would actually prohibit landlords from refusing to rent to a tenant because they were evicted during COVID-19 pandemic time, which I think is a great bill for folks who've been left behind during this last year or so. But again, yeah, to the point, there's not a lot of direct bills that are moving through session that affect affordable housing, but there are some out there that could indirectly affect it in terms of zoning and other aspects.
That's one of the things that we hear too when we sit down with legislators and we're advocating for affordable housing. They say a lot of the work can be done on the local level versus the state. So if we're in our backyards, right, we're meeting with our local governments. Cody, what are some of those conversations then that we can be having? You've mentioned zoning, permitting is another one, impact fees. What are some of those conversations that we can be having to make sure that on the local level, they're not kind of getting away with it either, that we're still holding them accountable for an issue that affects their residents?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to look at, which is it's always an eye-opening experience, is just looking at your local government zoning map. And it's always color-coded, and in most local governments across the state are primarily zoned for single-family only housing, which at this point, given our booming population, is just unsustainable for our growth in Florida. And not only does that have a direct impact to the cost of development in a lot of places, but it puts a legal cap on the number of housing units that can be built in a particular area. So I think starting with that is important. You mentioned impact fees. I mean, there are a lot of unique zoning and land use tools that local governments have to lower the cost of development. And there's specifically one bill that was passed last year that I think is still being worked out at the local level, which would actually allow affordable housing developments to be permitted on commercial and industrial sites without needing a rezoning, which just opens up a lot more land to affordable housing development. So I would start with just looking at the zoning map, really understanding, what is a legal cap of homes in a particular area, and what can be done to make development easier just to increase the supply of housing overall.
Yeah, that's definitely a conversation that we have often. So I appreciate you reiterating that, because I think, as we all want to kind of work towards solving this issue, we have to see things like those barriers, and that everybody kind of throws it to the state, but we do know that locally, our local governments do have a hand on what happens with housing, what they allow, where they allow it. You mentioned COVID, and I think that's something that's really important, especially for public serving organizations, is that we know those calls that we've been getting. So a year after COVID, many housing advocates have expressed that there's a housing crisis looming. Evictions, foreclosures are going to increase, and they're disproportionately going to affect our Latino essential workers. What policy recommendations do you guys see that might help this, mitigate this impending crisis?
There's a couple of things that right now, the people of Florida just voted in raise the minimum wage to $15. I think that we know in Florida is a hospitality industry, tourism industry, where the minimum wage is going to be the wage, sadly, that our people is making. A lot of our people, many of the populations that we have recently displaced from Hurricane Maria, so they don't have the means, they haven't had that opportunity to build that nest egg. So minimum wage is going to be the wage that our people is living. So any initiative that raise the wages of our people is going to put them in a better track of being able to have housing. Bills that are in the Senate, like the one that we were talking about, the shutdown, to stop the shutdown of utility bills, is going to put them in a best way to have the safe housing that they deserve. Because many of the leases that we see here in Florida has a specific language that says if your water or if your light is cut off, you are due for eviction. So that language like that is just, in situations like that, are just going to throw more people in the streets. Right now, we know that we just have the Biden administration that signed a COVID relief bill. We know federal money is coming to Florida. Now it's up to Florida leadership to take that money and invest it in the people instead of having actions like they do with Medicaid expansion and say they don't need this funding. So these are conversations that we need to be having with our elected officials, but also with our local cities. There's no reason why either Osceola, Orange, Volusia, West Palm Beach are not allocating local money for housing as well.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, I think in terms of like the short-term impacts of COVID, I think it all starts and ends with the money, right? As was mentioned, if you combine like the federal bill that was passed in December with the bill that was passed last week, Florida's going to receive over $2 billion in emergency rental assistance specifically. And it's going to 30 or so local governments, it's going to the state. And just that, putting pressure on those entities to get the money out the door quickly and effectively is a priority. So if you're in a local government that serves over 200,000 people, your local government should receive a direct rental assistance allocation from the federal government. I think it's important to just put pressure on your local officials to make sure that money gets out the door quickly, because it can be used out until September of next year, and then by that time it may be too late. So I think just putting the pressure on getting the money to the people that need it most is just the priority right now. And then afterwards, there's questions about evictions or foreclosure plans where people are on forbearance who may need to catch up in those payments and what to do with them. A lot of moving issues at once, but just say start with the money, follow the money, especially what was passed last week, which is a huge amount of money for renters and homeowners in the state.
Yeah, and I think later in the day, people can participate in a panel discussion on nonprofits and how they access those resources. So I think that's really important, because as we look at the landscape and we see all these dollars coming down for nonprofits, for community advocates, it's how do you tap into that? What are those conversations? Who are you having those conversations with? Because it looks like a lot of money, but how can our nonprofits, especially our Hispanic serving organizations, tap into those dollars to make sure that we're strengthening our communities? One last question before we're able to show Senator Victor Torres' comments. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but just if we can expand a little bit on what that relationship looks like between a living wage and increased opportunities for affordable housing. We know that, programs have salary requirements. We know that they look at what your family makes, what everybody in the household makes. But we also know that if you're making $10 an hour, you're not going to be able to purchase a home. So just really quickly, because we have about 2 minutes, if one of you want to kind of touch on the living wage.
I mean, I have to go back to what I said, right? Here in Florida, minimum wage is important, is the core of what our communities should be doing. Money needs to go to the people, not to corporations. Corporations and everyone in Florida should be advocating that minimum wage gets raised in Florida, that is truly a living wage, so that people can have dignity housing based on the income that they have.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we're ready for the video.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Puerto Rico Day at the Capitol. Bienvenido. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank all the people who made it possible with the organizations. Good morning. Welcome to Puerto Rico Day at the Capitol. Bienvenido. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank all the people who made it possible with the organizations. We Puerto Ricans are one of the largest minorities in the state of Florida. I have the privilege to represent the largest population of Puerto Ricans in Florida for the past 9 years. Even though this event is different because it's virtual, the essence is still the same. Good morning. We are getting together to learn, to have open conversations, and to advocate for ourselves. For being here. I want to thank all the people who made it possible with the organizations. We Puerto Ricans are one of the largest minorities in the state of Florida. I have the privilege to represent the largest population of Puerto Ricans in Florida for the past 9 years. Even though this event is different because it's virtual, the essence is still the same. We are getting together to learn, to have open conversations, and to advocate for ourselves. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you learn a lot. For being here. I want to thank all the people who made it.
Muchas gracias a los panelistas. Thank you so much to the panelists.